So if you're in your 40s, this is the time that if you're going to be like, no to Alzheimer's and dementia, I'm going to get it together, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to eat right, so that in my 60s or in my 70s, the likelihood is less.
Your body is conservative. If you don't move it, you lose it. We are programmed after a certain point for things to start going downhill. But there are ways you can reverse that. But you can't wait until you're in your 60s and 70s. I have a couple, and both of them are 90 plus, and they still go to dance once a week. They come in, no canes, no walkers, and they're active. Your brain really doesn't stop this what's called neuroplasticity changing till you die. If you do stop something that's having a negative effect on your brain like drugs, and you provide it with a healthy environment like exercise and B vitamins and a healthy diet, you can see some improvement.
The season of health is on cruise through HTX, and a brief reminder before we get started to please, for the love of all things sacred, talk to your primary care physician before trying anything you hear during any of these episodes this season. Dr. Patton, welcome to the hot seat once again.
Hey, glad to be here.
When was the last time a patient case broke your heart?
Oh, wow. Man, this was actually recently. Last week, as a matter of fact. And this one was tough because it was a patient that I started on one of the new Alzheimer's medications. Now, one of the complications with this is that it can cause bleeds in the brain.
I'm sorry, bleeds?
Yes, where you actually have bleeding of the brain. But there are ways you can, you educate the patient, and I had educated this patient, and you can take certain precautions, not putting them on blood thinners. But, unfortunately, this patient had a problem with their lungs, a blood clot. And because of that, they went into another hospital emergently, and that hospital gave them blood thinners, and they ended up with a bleed. And I didn't find out about it till after the fact, but it really just hurt because functionally, she was doing so well before I started her on this treatment, and now to have this this major thing to happen, it was tough. But that's part of the problem. You can educate about the risks. You hope that the risks don't happen, but they do. And when they do, it's really tough because you feel responsible, because I wrote this prescription. I started this patient on this medication, so it's hard to, even though you can check the do the education, everything else, and know that you may not have directly been responsible, you still take some responsibility for that.
Yeah, just like you said, it's your signature on that script, right? And there are just so many things that are outside of your control. What was the conversation like with the family?
Yeah. Surprisingly, the family was still appreciative of the efforts as far as trying to help their mother, their loved one.
Yeah.
It was tough because it was still new, but in the end, it boils down to communication. Mm-hmm. And what I try to do is fully communicate, talk to the families about the risks, benefits, and we make that decision. And that way, if something does happen, no one is caught off guard. No one is blindsided. But it's still it's still a difficult conversation. And throughout my career, I've attended funerals. I always try to, send cards if something happened, or even visit patients in the hospital. Just to show that I'm still there, I'm still supporting you, even though something happened. I'm still here. I'm still here for you and the family.
So there are preventative measures that we can take to at least stave off, possibly delay in our entire lifetimes, something like Alzheimer's, dementia, some of the things that you treat as a neurologist. I, being 49, moderately healthy, I love me some sweets, and I know that's probably something that
Moderation.
Moderation. Was it you can have a gingerbread cookie, but not the entire gingerbread mansion, I guess.
Yeah, yes, right.
But there was something I had heard in another podcast. I wish I could remember what it was, but they said something to the effect of it takes 20 years for these types of things to really kick in. So if you're in your 40s, this is the time that if you're going to be like, hey, hell no to Alzheimer's and dementia. I'm going to get it together. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to eat right, or at least eat better, so that in my 60s or in my 70s, the likelihood is less. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's very true. We know that with these, and I'll put it in a collective class, what's called neurodegenerative disorders, like Alzheimer's disease, like Parkinson's disease, that by the time you have symptoms, the disease process, you could be 10, 15, 20 years into the disease process. So you're absolutely right. But the problem is, it's hard to get someone to prepare for something that they don't know is coming 20, 15, 20 years down the line. But now through research, and a lot of these are, there's some really good books out there, good resources that talk about the importance of diet, exercise, nutrition. I've started to take similar advice for myself with brain games and doing different things. That is where I think the key to medicine moving forward is really going to be, is how do we teach and put emphasis on a preventative lifestyle instead of so much money and effort into what I call catastrophic care, meaning that once something happens, now you're given medications and having to do things to undo it. And for the most part, a lot of preventative stuff is free or low cost. It's exercise, it's diet. But as opposed to the past, where all the research was just on once you had a disease and how to fix it, we're now coming around to where we're really looking at like your metabolic overlay of your body and how are things playing, and looking at your cholesterol, and being able to try to give that advice to you at 49 or to someone else at 39. What can you do now to try to impact your life when you're 60? And life happens. Anything can happen. I don't know. I may not make it to 60, but while I'm here and you have the ability to make a change that could positively impact your life 10, 20 years down the line, let's start talking about those things, and let's start doing and implementing those things.
And what about young people? And I don't want to be the old guy that's like, these kids, these damn kids, and they're, but I mean, there really is a sense of invincibility that I'm sure you may have had. We both probably had a really good time in college. And there's that sense of like, I can rule the world and the world is my oyster, and I'm just going to do all these things. But what would be your advice for somebody who is kind of living high on the hog and with little thought about, oh goodness, 60? I can't even see myself at 25 or 30. Well, what would be your advice for them? Live a little, but also keep in mind what?
Yeah. So we all think we're going to live forever, and especially when you're, in your 20s or in college and so forth, like you said, that invincibility. But what I would say, one is you have to look at genetics. You have to look at how is your family aging. But my biggest piece of advice would be, it's okay to live, but still keep in mind, the end goal is to live longer and to live a prosperous life and Dr. Atai, author that I have been reading, he talks about not just your lifespan, meaning how many years you're living, but how many years are you living, healthy,
Yes.
and that you're able to, exercise and communicate, because
Right.
it's a big difference between just being alive,
Yeah.
but maybe you're not mobile or you can't go anywhere and do it, and actually living and thriving.
Yeah.
So don't just think about longevity as far as just life, but think about, okay, how do I do things now in my 20s to make sure that I can live a long and prosperous life? And that could be doing things like taking care of your joints, just staying in your general health. Start implementing habits now. Like, okay, I want to make sure that I work out 3 days a week. I want to make sure that, okay, maybe I go to a restaurant every now and then, but let's make sure I limit that to once a week. Start implementing those habits now, because once they become habits, it's a lot easier later on in life to keep them up.
Going back to what you were mentioning about health span, lifespan, that sort of a thing, there seems to be this kind of a notion within my family that, oh, well, why would you want to live to 100? That sounds horrible. And it's like, well, actually, no, because I want to live long, and I not only want to see my grandkids, but my great grandkids. And if my Creator blesses me with the chance to meet great grandkids, why the heck not?
Yeah.
And who's to say that I'm going to be wheelchair bound or scooter bound or not able to walk or bedridden? I would like to be kind of like my grandpa Freddie at 89, getting stuck under a car in the summer because I'm trying to fix something. Now, I don't do automotive work, but I want to be that guy. It's like, oh, where's Grandpa Freddie? Did he go walking again in the woods, or did he go for a 3-mile run? Like, see, that's the kind of stuff. That's why I want to be able to do that kind of stuff and be sort of that guidepost for my family and my friends and my inner circle.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why it's important to not just look at lifespan, but look at health span.
Yeah.
Because I'm like you. So, well, why would I want to live 100? If you study centenarians or those who've lived long, a lot of them are doing just that. They're still very active. They're still very mobile. They're doing walks. And you can do that, but your body is conservative. If you don't move it, you lose it.
Yep.
And we're programmed after a certain point for things to start going downhill. But there are ways you can reverse that. But you can't wait until you're in your 60s and 70s. You have to start early through exercise, through diet, taking care of yourself, taking care of your joints. Little things like core stability and your ability to get off the floor unassisted. Those are the type of things that will make sure that when you get into your 90s and 80s and 90s, that your life is different from, like you said, being in a scooter or being bedbound, where you are active. You're actually traveling to see your grandkids or your grandkids, and you can still participate in the community. And that's a mindset, and that's a health set that you have to start early. It has to be a goal, just like you set goals for a week or this year I want to do this. That has to be a long-term goal that, I want to start living a lifestyle now to make sure that as long as I'm here, I am, functional and able to be as independent as possible.
Do you find your patients to be more receptive to this sort of advice now as opposed to when you first started?
Yeah. I think times have changed where we're starting now to have these conversations. Unfortunately, being in neurology, I most times see people after they already have something, like a chronic disease. So I don't get to do as much preventative care as I like outside of platforms like podcasts or talking or different things like that. But the lifespan has increased. We're doing such a better job of treating heart disease, cancer, all of these things that have been the big catastrophic diseases that have caused a shortened lifespan. Lifespan is increasing.
Yeah.
So as that has happened, now we're starting to really have those conversations about, okay, we're increasing lifespan. So now let's start talking about how do we make sure that now that we're living longer, that those years, later years, are productive and functional.
That these years count.
Absolutely.
120 years ago, I read this amazing book. I forget the doctor's name, but he worked with Dr. Phil. It's called The Great Age Reboot, and he talked about how at the beginning of the 20th century that an American male would the average lifespan was like in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how old you are, but I'm guessing we're about the same age. You and I would not be here talking with one another if that was the average lifespan.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine being born back then for a number of reasons, but especially that it's going to be a miserable existence and you die in your 40s.
Yeah, but now people are living longer. They're working longer.
Yeah.
I have a number of patients that are 90 plus, and they come in walking, independent. They're jazzy. They're participating in dance classes and hanging out. That's what I would consider, a good life longevity.
That is life success. That's life goals,
absolutely.
as the kids would say, right? Life goals, man.
Absolutely. So you
Jeez.
think about years ago where, to make it to your 40s and 50s was the goal.
Yeah.
And you were old. Now, I have patients come in and they're dating. They're like, man, the 70s are the new 40s. And I'm like, hey, do it. But that all goes into that whole mental aspect of it, because a large part of your body is reflective of what your mind says. If I just sit here and say, I'm weak and I'm decrepit and I can't do anything, eventually my body's going to start reacting and say, okay, you are. But if I say I'm strong and let's go out and walk, then your body will react.
Yeah.
So it's all about your mental mindset and really having that mindset like, okay, let's keep moving. And that's what I tell people, just keep moving, keep moving. I started using a desk, like a Versa desk with elevators, so I can just, take steps throughout the day. Just keep moving. Mm-hmm. Keep moving. It beats the alternative.
It really does. What is a favorite thing that one of your 90s plus patients has taught you?
I would so one of the most favorite thing that one of my 90 plus patients really taught me is to stay social and, like I said, keep moving. I have a couple, and both of them are 90 plus, and they still go to dance once a week. And they come in, no canes, no walkers, and they're active. Mm-hmm. They're active. And so that, I think, I have another patient who's 90 plus, and she had her family move her into a community so that she can be around other people. And now she's dating again. But we laugh about it, but it's kind of like it's fun. Like, why? As long as you're living, then don't give up on life.
Right. I mean, I love, and I laugh because I love that, because it flies in the face of, oh, well, why would you want to live to be a 90-year-old or a 100-year-old? It's like, because I actually like living.
Yeah.
It's such a weird thing to say, like, oh, I can't imagine being that old. I want to live, but I don't want to live that long. Yeah. It's a very, I have a hard time digesting that.
Yeah.
Really.
And I've struggled with that too, where, it's tough. Sometimes going through school and everything that I've been through, and I used to be one of those people where it's like, hey man, how's it going? Oh, I'm making it, or oh, I'm all right, I'm hanging in there. And eventually I just said, you know what, like, let me stop even putting that out there in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Because even if you're not having a good day or things aren't going right, it beats the alternative. So now, hey, I'm good. Yeah. I'm living, regardless of what's going on.
Yeah.
as long as I'm here, and if God has blessed me with another day, you can make a difference. Yeah. So that's what I mean. But it changes your mindset. What are you putting out there?
Yes.
What are you putting out there? Not just in your materials or your work and everything else, but psychologically, what are you saying? What are the affirmations that are you saying to yourself and really putting out there? I think that has a lot to do with it and how you do overall.
Absolutely. What is something about the brain that when you were in med school absolutely blew your mind, and to this day you're just like, I'm a neurologist, and yes, this is it. This is why I do what I do.
Yeah.
This is...
Man, it's so many things, but if I had to say one thing, it would be the resiliency of the brain. And the fact that before we used to think that the brain stopped developing at 20, 25. You remember seeing old ads, well, this is your brain on drugs, and they would fry the egg.
Yeah.
But your brain really doesn't stop. There's what's called neuroplasticity changing, until you die. So if you do stop something that's having a negative effect on your brain, like drugs and so forth, and you provide it with a healthy environment like exercise and B vitamins and a healthy diet, you can see some improvement. There are stories. I forget the guy's name. I want to say his name was Gage or something like that. But this was a long time ago, 30s, 40s. He was working on the railway, building the railways throughout the United States, and an explosive went out and drove a spike through his nose, through his brain.
Oh.
And he lived. But it went through his frontal lobe. And that story blew my mind, because this was a very active person in the church, and he was like a deacon and blah, blah, blah. But then he started cursing and drinking and cheating on his wife. But it was because this piece of metal went through his frontal lobe. And your frontal lobe is like your check system. So those types of things have always intrigued me about how the different areas of the brain really form who you are, whether it be through your fight or flight system, through your amygdala, or your frontal lobe, which really defines your personality and how you interact. Is that the prefrontal
cortex?
Yeah, that's part of your frontal lobe.
Okay.
Yeah. And the ability of the brain to change. I mean, you can do, and this blew my mind, in that some kids who had severe seizures, they'll go out and actually take out half your brain. And these kids can develop to, fairly normal lives, right, just by the other half taking over for that half. So those are the types of things that when I look at what I do in the brain, I'm like, this is some pretty cool stuff.
What is the most underrated part of the brain? If you had to narrow it down, like, okay, the whole thought that any of this can do any of this, is just wild. I was just so we're in a Regis suite. This is where my little studio is, and I moved into a bigger space, and it overlooks the Galleria area. And I see the Galleria, I see the Loop, and I see the traffic, and the people look like ants, and there's a theater across the street, and I'm just like, the things that humans can build.
Yeah.
And just looking at, and then I look at my hands and look at my feet, and I just think about like all the things that I can do as an individual. And it's just crazy that there's this thing inside my head that is telling my body without telling my body to do all these things. Yeah. And there are other people like me, right? Humans is what we collectively call each other, that are doing all these other things that are even more insanely wild. And so that's why I want to know, like, what is the most underrated part of all of this? It's just a miracle that it all works.
I know. And you're talking to a neurologist, so it's hard for me to like put it into one. But, if I would probably say the amygdala. And the amygdala is this little small, it's not a big part of the brain like the frontal cortex and all that.
Yeah.
Little small, like almond shape, but it's one of the key areas that controls your emotional center. Okay. But not just that, it's connected to everything. memory, vision, your reaction, because what studying that part of the body just taught me is just that everything functions off each other. And it goes back to prehistoric times, Neanderthal time, when life was so much simpler. You talk about that everybody looking like ants and everybody doing, but think about back when life was just trying to reproduce and trying to survive.
Yeah.
You got tigers jumping out, you got lions jumping out, you got, you're just trying to survive without heaters and air conditioners. And it was that part that controlled that when something happens where I need to defend myself quickly, your brain can quickly coordinate different areas of the body. And on the flip side, now, because of just so much stimulus that we have and so much that we're dealing with social media and everything else that has our emotions all over the place,
Yeah.
that small part of the brain is having such a profound effect on people's health. Yeah. So bringing it 360 from simple times when it was just hunt, gather, protect, to now you see how this little small area of the brain is still doing its thing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's the same software.
Yeah, absolutely.
The same
Without upgrades,
software. Yeah. There's no upgrades. It's the same software that built the pyramids. That,
Yeah. I mean, when you think about the speed of thing, I was having a conversation with someone the other day about cell phones and how we've gone over a very short period of time between the little phone that you had in the car that was like a box, or the one you had to carry around, the big box, to now, cell phones, pretty much everyone has one and it does everything. That's because our brain and how evolutionarily we've been able to make these huge leaps and connections, because your brain is circuits. It's circuits, and you keep feeding those circuits and you connect them and they interconnect. And that's why you can see kind of innovation and people can think outside of the box. So it's amazing.
And energy from everyone else. So let's say, go back to like the phones, right? So Steve Jobs, creator of the Mac, one of the greatest geniuses of all time. He creates the Mac, which is, turns into the iPhone, then people are like, oh, wow, look at what I can do with this iPhone. So all this energy is just bouncing off of one another. Oh, look what Dr. Patton's talking about, and I'm watching it on my iPhone. Well, now that I saw Dr. Patton on this video on LinkedIn, I'm going to go and do this. Yeah. And now that I saw, and so we're all feeding off of each other's energies and what we're doing and what we can accomplish. And that's probably why we've seen so much growth. I don't know.
Well, I probably so, because take it back to Neanderthal days, hunting gatherers. It was only when we started coming together in communities where we really start seeing this growth and explosion in population, because now, I can help, or this mother can help this mother take care of their child, or it wasn't just me going out finding something to kill and eat for my family. Now we can collectively find something. Yeah. So that community aspect has led to a lot of growth and bouncing ideas, energy, feeding energy, and it's just exponential growth. I was in the you talk about Mac. I was in the Apple store not too long ago and getting something done to my computer, and they're like, "Hey, you want to demo these VR goggles?" And man, I put those things on, and I wasn't really ready for that experience, because we can literally be in a meeting in Iceland or wherever, somewhere, and you get this panoramic 360. And I say, I can actually take meetings from this, and they see me, and they're like, yeah, they'll see you, and and it's like you're in the room, and you can touch stuff, and you can do this and that. And I just thought to myself, man, how far have we come? Yeah. And that's because of combination of human innovation and collective thought and people, like you said, bouncing ideas off each other.
Love it. Dr. Patton, it's always a good time when I get to hang out with you, and y'all, please check out his podcast. He is a client of mine. It is Your Health, Your Wealth, available wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and EddiePattonMD.com.
Yep.
It's the website. You want to go and check him out for all things neurology. Doc, thank you so much for being a part of the show and for being a client.
Oh, man. It's always fun.
All right.